We come now, brothers and sisters, young people and friends, to have a look at the shape and form of this house. Did you see those words in Ezekiel 44, verse 5? And Yahweh said unto me, Son of man, mark well, and behold with thine eyes, and hear with thine ears, all that I say unto thee concerning all the ordinances of the house of Yahweh, and all the laws thereof. And mark well the entering in of the house, with every going forth of the sanctuary. Why do you think that's there? Well, it's obvious that what God is saying to Ezekiel is, I want you to understand this place, not just its construction, its architectural detail. I want you to understand what it teaches and where it's going to lead you. So it's very important. Go back a page, Ezekiel 43 to verse 10. Now this is just after the record of the glory entering the house. And we read in verse 10, Thou, son of man, show the house to the house of Israel. So this is why he has to take careful note of it, you see. He's going to have to show it to the house of Israel. Those people who were with him by the river Kibar in captivity in Babylon, he was going to show it to them. Why? That they may be ashamed of their iniquities. And let them measure the pattern. Let them understand it. What for? And if they be ashamed of all that they have done, show them the form of the house, and the fashion thereof, and the goings out thereof, and the comings in thereof, and all the forms thereof, and all the ordinances thereof, and all the forms thereof, and all the laws thereof, and write it in their sight, that they may keep the whole form thereof, and all the ordinances thereof, and do them. Hang on. But this is a house about the future. So what do you reckon that means, brothers and sisters? It means that the study of the temple, of Ezekiel's prophecy, is very, very important to people who want to be there. That's what it means. Right? And unfortunately, there are those who have got all sorts of strange ideas about this house. It's very, very important, because what God is saying is, if you can come to grips with this place, if you can make it a reality, if you know and understand the lessons it teaches, then it is going to shape your whole way of life. And that's how I'm going to get you there. Where there's a vision, where there's no vision, the people perish. But where there is a vision, the people can have eternal life in this place. It will shape your life. So when we talk here today about entering in by the east gate, I want you to take careful note of some of the lessons that we're going to learn. So let's just review what we saw in our previous study about the Holy Oblation there in the centre of the land. This 56-mile square holy portion devoted to the worship of our God, with its three divisions, as we saw. The top division, the section of the sons of Zadok, the immortal priests, the king priests of the future age. The middle section for the mortal Levites, and the lower section, the common section, used for the housing of the worshippers, the mortal worshippers who will come to the land to worship in the temple once or twice in a lifetime. They won't be coming every year, there'll be people coming all the time, but individuals will only come once or twice in a lifetime, because it will take them a long time to get there. For example, if you come from Australia, there'll be a land bridge across the Indonesian archipelago, I believe. It will take you 11 months to get there. It'll be the most delightful trip in your life. You know why? Because every 20 miles you have to stop to rest overnight. And you'll knock on a door, and that door will be a Christadelphian door. The next door you come to, the next evening, will be a Christadelphian door. There will not be a house that's not a Christadelphian house. They'll all be in the truth as we describe it. Everybody will know and understand the truth. And they will be delighted to have people stop with them. So that's going to be an experience. It's only going to happen once or twice in a lifetime for most people. We saw that southern section, we saw the central section, and we saw the prince's portion, west and east of the Holy Oblation. So here's just a stand back and take in the picture of this building. We have the circular inner temple surrounding Mount Zion, which is elevated in the midst. We have living waters flowing from under the altar, down the south side of Mount Zion and making their way underground out under the southern and northern gates of the temple and flowing off to the east. We have visitors entering from either north or south who go out the opposite side. And we're going to talk about all of that as we proceed in our studies. So here's that important injunction that we just talked about. Son of man, mark well, behold with thine eyes, and hear with thine ears all that I say unto thee, all the ordinances. Mark well the entering in of the house. And we're going to have a look at that entering into the house for Christ and the saints. This is what Brother Sully says in the Temple of Ezekiel's Prophecy, page 11. The non-observance of the injunction by the authors of many absurd drawings probably explains their failure. Not even the most careful students of the subject seem hitherto to have grasped its meaning. Now, he's writing this, of course, 100 years or so ago. Some, he says, have done good service in critical and scholastic emendation of the text, and that's a critical factor, by the way. Some of the interpretations that have been wonky are wonky because they haven't gone back to the original language. They haven't understood what's actually being said by the text. Brother Sully was himself a Hebraist of some quality, and he used to go to the very best Hebraists that he could find because he wanted to make sure he got this right. He goes on to say, but no one has produced a drawing which can be said even to pretend to find a reasonable place for all the features mentioned in the prophecy. In every case, some important element is missing. This, then, is the writer's aim. Whether that object is accomplished, events will decide. So far, however, as the writer can see, this exposition, he's talking about his book, this exposition does find a reasonable place for everything mentioned by Ezekiel. So let's have a look at some of the tools that Ezekiel has to use. In Ezekiel 40 verse 5, we read about one of those important tools. It says this, he's just encountered the man who's the builder of the house. And in verse 5 we read, and behold a wall on the outside of the house round about, and in the man's hand a measuring reed of 6 cubits long by the cubit and a hand breadth. So he measured the breadth of the building 1 reed and the height 1 reed. So he's measuring the outer wall, at least the base of the outer wall of this house. So what's he got here? Well, Brother Sully says this. Evidence at present accessible assigns as the length of the cubit and the hand breadth either 21 inches or 24 inches. So 21 inches, that's if you happen to be European or Australian, it's 53.34 centimetres. We won't worry about that. We'll just use the North American, or at least the American style. 21 inches or 24 inches. So what we have here, a reed is therefore either 10.5 feet or 12 feet long. Okay, so when we read about a reed, it's say somewhere between 10.5 and 12 feet. We're going to take the 24 inch just for the sake of simplicity, and of course, Brother David agrees with that. So it's a 2-foot cubit, and therefore a 12-foot reed, because a reed is 6 cubits. So have a look with me at Ezekiel chapter 42, verses 16 to 20. These passages here, from verse 15 onwards, are the measurement of the walls of the house. So we'll pick it up from verse 16. He measured the east side with the measuring reed. Measuring reed? 12 foot long. 500 reeds. Okay, now we'll come back and we'll specify what that means exactly in a minute. 500 reeds. And he does the same in the north, verse 17, south, verse 18, west, verse 19. Then verse 20 says, he measured it by the 4 sides. It had a wall round about. Now that's that wall was referred to in chapter 40. In verse 5, remember, that it was a reed high and a reed wide, so it's 12 foot high, 12 foot at the base, okay? That's that wall he's talking about. It had a wall round about 500 reeds long and 500 broad. to make a separation between the sanctuary and the profane place. So this is the length of the 4 walls. Each wall is 500 reeds long. Using the 21-inch cubit, that would mean, of course, 5,250 feet, or 9.94 of a mile. You use the 24-inch cubit, then it's a little bit over a mile, 1.13 mile long each wall. So it's a pretty big building, isn't it? It's a mile square, this building. It's a massive structure. And each wall that we've just been looking at has a structure upon it at least 43 cubits. That's 86 feet high. That's the measurement given in Ezekiel 40 verse 6 through 16. This outside wall is the fascia of halls called cellae. So when I use the term cellae, we're talking about a big room, a big hall, okay? 50 cubits wide, surrounding the entire building. So this is just the outside of the building. We're going to see that there's another row of cellae inside that, 100 cubits away. So it's massive by any measure, this building. Now, remember how I said to you that just keep in mind the words that we saw in Zechariah 14 verse 10 about the proportions of this house? It, Zion, shall be lifted up and inhabited in her place, because there's going to be a building there, from Benjamin's gate to the place of the first gate, to the corner gate, and from the tower of Hananeel unto the king's wine presses. Well, we have another record about its proportions. In Jeremiah 31, verses 38 to 40. Behold, the days come, saith Yahweh, that the city shall be built to Yahweh from the tower of Hananeel. Well, you read that before. Zechariah chapter 14. From the tower of Hananeel unto the gate of the corner. And the measuring line shall yet go forth over against it upon the hill Gareb. So there's another little place that we have to look at in a minute. Shall compass about to Goath, and the whole valley of the dead bodies, which is a reference to the valley of the son of Hinnom, and of the ashes, and of all the fields under the brook Kidron, unto the corner of the horse gate toward the east, shall be holy unto Yahweh. It shall not be plucked up nor thrown down any more forever. So this is where the temple's going to be built. This is why you have reference to the same places that you read in Zechariah 14. So what does it look like? Well, it looks like this. Here's your corner gate. Here's your tower of Hananeel. The hill of Gareb is thought to be down here. And this here is the valley of dead bodies, the valley of the son of Hinnom. So you can see that this is about the right size to fit into those points that have been marked out in Zechariah 14 and Jeremiah in his prophecy. So I want to give you now some little finer details on the size of this house. We have, of course, a lot of orthodox works that illustrate a small temple. We have some in our brotherhood that speak of a small temple. They're not correct. I'm going to show you why they're not correct. Quite apart from the measurement of 500 reeds, which is around about a mile, here is some other evidence that they're not correct. Because when you read about the inner circular sanctuary, you read details about it. Now, can you see the curvature of this building here? So you've got a curvature, right? Well, when you go to the detail of this building, you find that the inner doors, that is those closest to Mount Zion, this is the most holy here, by the way, and we'll cover that later. The width of this door here is 6 cubits. But when you step over the pavement of this building to the other side of the house, the width of the door here is 7 cubits. Now, why would that be the case? All of the measurements of the posts and the side bars of the doors are the same on either side. So why would you have 6 cubit gap here and a 7 cubit gap over there, do you think? Yeah, because you've got curvature, see, and you've got a radius. And here is the radius. Now we know the measurements, they're given to us. They're given to us, the measurements are, you can add them up, from the centre of Mount Zion to the inner door is 1120 cubits. Then the width of this building from inner door to outer door is 70 cubits. Okay? And it just so happens that's mathematically perfect. Accidental? Don't think so. So here you've got Ezekiel 41 verse 3. Then went he inward and measured the post of the door 2 cubits, and that post of the door was the side bar on the door, and the door 6 cubits wide. And then he went across the other to the other side, and it's 7 cubits wide. The radius of the circular sanctuary mathematically matches the width of the doors. So there is another proof that this is a very large building. And this is we're just talking here about the central circular part of the building. So let's then have a look at a block plan of the temple. Like the tabernacle before it, and the temples of Solomon and others, this building has 3 courts. Right? We want to identify those 3 courts. Now, this is the kind of detail that's provided that God wants us to grasp. And it's not difficult to grasp if you've got the facts right. So let's have a look at these 3 courts. Let's start with the most important court, the most holy place. You see this blue area? That blue area, in actual fact, to be really accurate, should be up at those inner doors that run around this huge inner circular sanctuary. But inside that is the most holy. Only immortals can go into the most holy. This is the place where immortal priests will operate in the house. Okay? So that's the most important court. Let's have a look at the outer court. Now the outer court is this area here. It goes from the outer wall, which you'll remember is 500 cubits long, right? It goes from there to the fascia wall of the inner row of cellae or halls, these buildings here. So that constitutes your outer court. And then you have the inner court. Now the inner court goes from this fascia here on the inside of this row of buildings to the doors of the inner sanctuary, the circular sanctuary. So this area, bounded by that blue line that you can see there, this is all called the inner court. Now I'm going to show you a little later on how important it is to understand where these courts are. Because when you read the record, it says, and he went into the inner court. You have to know what he means by inner court. Otherwise you have no idea where Ezekiel is. So once you identify this, it's fairly easy to understand where Ezekiel is at any given time. Because we're told the detail. So here's the building, looking down, of course, from above. Huge, 1 mile square, with its 3 courts. I want you to come to Ezekiel chapter 41. Now, I bring you to Ezekiel 41 and verse 4 in particular, because this is where people make mistakes about the size of the most holy. There are those who say, well, the most holy of the temple of Ezekiel's prophecy is 20 cubits square. That's about the size of this room. All right. Reckon that's sufficient size, most holy, for a temple that's 1 mile square? Obviously not. So where do they make their mistake, and what does it really mean? But let's come to Ezekiel 41 verse 4. It says, and this is the context of the circular temple being measured. So he measured the length thereof, 20 cubits, and the breadth, 20 cubits, before the temple. And he said unto me, this is the most holy place. Now, just reading that, you would say, well, yeah, the most holy place is 20 cubits square. Not so. And now, why not? Well, the length there is a reference to the inside rooms of this circular building. I'm going to show you the picture in a minute. From rib to rib. Now, you might say, well, what are ribs? Well, I'll show you a picture of the ribs in a minute as well. There are 3 of them. three that are 20 cubits across the cellar, from the inner door to the outer door. 3 sections of this building, and it has ribs or ribbing above it, and there are 3 floors to this building, so it's massive. The word breadth that we just read there in verse 4, and the breadth of it, and the breadth 20 cubits, actually represents the height. Now we know that's true, because the width is given to us. The width of this particular room is 16 cubits. And I can prove that to you. It's 16 cubits, so it can't be a reference to breadth. It is a reference to height. And Brother Sully points this out in his book. But quite often, unfortunately, the translators haven't got this right. Or they've used a meaning of a Hebrew word that was not in accordance with context. So this is the beginning of the Most Holy. It's not a reference to the size of the Most Holy, it's where the Most Holy begins. So let's have a look at the map. We know from the detail provided that between these posts, from centre to centre, is 16 cubits. Here's your doorway of 6 cubits, remember? Then you go across to the outer part where your doorway is 7. These are the 3 sections that are 20 cubits wide. So there's 3 by 20. So what does it mean then by the ribs? What's that about? Can you see these crosses? Can you see the crosses here in these rooms? So what do these crosses represent? Well, they represent the ribbing at the top of the ceiling. So you've got a 20 cubit height and you've got this ribbing. Now, this, of course, is taken from a church. I'm sure that won't be the way it is in the temple of the future age, but they use this kind of ceiling in very large church buildings. This is how you reinforce it. This is how you hold it together. So this is the kind of ribbing referred to here by these crosses. And there are 3 sections of 20 cubits wide across this building. It's not a mini most holy place in the temple. It's the whole of Mount Zion that constitutes the most holy in the temple. And that's the place where the immortal priests will operate. And this is, you see this green line here? This green line, which is on the inner row of walls of this inner sanctuary, this is the beginning. This green line is the beginning of the most holy. It goes off towards the centre of Mount Zion. So this is how it looks. Just coming back to the 2 sections for immortals only. Now I want to show you that this is clearly the most holy. Obviously only immortals can go in there. But you know what? So it is too with the eastern portion of this house. The eastern outer court of this house is not for mortals. And we're going to demonstrate that is not for mortals. It is for Christ and the saints. I want to show you what happens there as we proceed in this study. It's very interesting what happens there, and it's very important. So let's then have a look at the outer court. This is the court of mortal Levitical ministration except for the eastern side of the house. So the north side, the south side, and the west side. The outer court area is where the Levites will do all administration, all the bottom end work, all the hard work, all the preparation of sacrifices, all that sort of stuff. That will be left to the mortal Levites. So it has symmetrical arches and pillars, 120 feet high, on both sides of the outer court with at least 11 entrance gates. The worshippers are met by a mortal Levite and sacrifices made on the north side. They ascend the 7 covenant steps to the entrance hall and then into the outer court. However, I want you to notice something in Ezekiel chapter 40. So come to Ezekiel 40. Now Ezekiel 40, the whole of the chapter, except from verse 44 onwards, is about the outer court buildings. It's about the shape of the outer court with the 2 rows of cellae. And we know that there are 7 steps that are taken to go up into this place. So when you come to the gate, and we'll talk a bit more about this as we proceed, and we talk about the way that sacrifice will be made, you encounter 7 steps. Now those can be seen here. This is the outside of the building. We come up, there's the slaying blocks, and there are 7 steps here. So let's just say, for argument's sake, that is the outside of the building. This is the going inwards into the building. Guess what we have? If you have a look at Ezekiel 40 and come to verse 31. We're on the south side of the house here, but it doesn't matter. It's the same thing said of the north and of other walls. It says in verse 31, and the arches thereof were toward it says the utter court in the King James. It should be the outer court. The arches thereof were toward the outer court, and palm trees, which is actually the posts of the temple, were upon the posts thereof, and the going up to it had 8 steps. Now, what does that mean? Well, it doesn't mean that when you get inside, you have another 8 steps to encounter. What it means is this, that there are 7 steps outside. You come through this gate, this access gate, you get inside here, you cross over the pavement, and guess what you've got over here? 1 more step. It's the 8th step. Now, why do you think that would be the case? Why do we have 7 out here and 1 here? Well, this is the answer. When you come as a mortal to worship in this house, you come in on the basis of the Abrahamic covenant to be baptised. That's why the river's there, for baptism, if you haven't been baptised. Now, obviously, younger people will come in, but we're talking about people who are responsible, who come to make sacrifice. Kids won't make sacrifice, but adults will. Come into this house, you encounter 7 steps. You come in here, you see the Levites, as we will discuss, preparing your sacrifices. You cross over here, you've got another step. So where are you going? Well, you're going inside. What's inside here? Well, the next thing is the inner court, and what's beyond the inner court? The most holy. You're going towards immortality. And 8 is the biblical number for immortality. Okay, so you're heading towards the centre of this house. You're going towards immortality. And what's the truth about? To get people to glorify God as immortals. So you start with the Abrahamic covenant, you end up as an immortal to give glory to Almighty God. That's the principle being taught these people when they come into that house. They meet 7 steps and then an 8th step on their way. The corner towers, of course, provide places for preparation of sacrifices for the altar and for the priests. So the priests who will be involved in the mortal priests distributing those sacrifices for the meals of fellowship that will be held in this house. Beyond the pavement of the outer court is the inner court, providing access to the circular temple. So there's just a brief overview of the outer court. I want you to come, if you would, to Ezekiel 43. Because this is where we get a picture of Christ and the saints entering this house. Let's read verse 1 of Ezekiel 43. Afterward he brought me to the gate, even to the gate that looketh toward the east. And behold, the glory of the God of Israel came from the way of the east, and his voice was like the noise of many waters, which is a symbolic language for the multitude, the vast multitude of the glorified saints. And the earth shined with his glory. And it was according to the appearance of the vision which I saw, even according to the vision that I saw when I came to destroy the city. Now what's that? It's a reference to chapter 1 of Ezekiel, to the vision of the cherubim. Okay, it goes right back there. Now what happened, of course, in Ezekiel chapter 10 and 11, because of the wickedness of the children of Israel, God withdrew the glory from the temple, and it departed away to the east. Well, now it's coming back. It's coming back in the form of Christ and his glorified saints who come in from the east, remember. Initially, they come to the Mount of Olives, it splits, and 40 years later, they're going to use the east to access this completed house. It'll be the first thing that happens of any moment in relation to this house. The most important thing. Christ is going to enter that house. You know what, brothers and sisters? When he enters, he's not going anywhere. He will not leave that building for 1,000 years. You and I will leave it to do various work all over the world. He's not going to leave it. He's not going to leave it. I'll show you that. So here we've got the record of the glory coming in. I want you to just read this with me. Whenever I read this, I get tingles up my spine. I want to show you why. Let's come to verse 4. And the glory of Yahweh came into the house by the way of the gate whose prospect is toward the east. It's the east gate. See this picture here? There's the east gate. So Christ and the saints are going to come into this east gate. Okay? It says this, verse 5. So the Spirit took me up and brought me into the inner court. And behold, the glory of Yahweh filled the house. And I heard him speaking unto me out of the house. And the man, that's the man of chapter 40, the builder of the house, it's a reference to Christ, okay? And the man stood by me. Get a picture of that. You know what that means? That when Christ comes in, he's not going to be alone. He's going to come in with a vast multitude of saints. And Ezekiel will be there. Ezekiel went there for you and me a long time ago. He went there for you and me. He represented the bride of Christ. And what did he hear? He heard the voice of God speaking to him out of the house. Now, God's not going to be there, but we'll hear his voice. Just like Christ used to hear his voice, remember? In John chapter 11? He used to hear God's voice. And people, when they heard it, it boomed like thunder. We're going to hear it. It's the first thing that will happen with this house when it's completed. When all the builders are gone and they've swept it and cleaned it, and the Levites have done their job, they'll go, they'll leave. And Christ and the saints will enter it. They'll be there alone. And they will go through the east gate. They will come to the inner court. What's in front of them? The exalted Mount Zion, the most holy. And from there, they hear the voice of God. The Shekinah glory is back. The dwelling presence of Yahweh is back in this place where it used to be in the days of Solomon. That's what's going to happen, brothers and sisters. And you and I hope to be there in that day, to witness these things. What a wonderful time that will be. So here, just get a picture in your mind of the outer court on the east. Just imagine being there amongst the vast multitude that will be in that east court. We want to talk about what's going to happen on this east court. You know, if you come to Ezekiel 44, we read about this in verses 1 to 3. Ezekiel 44 verse 1. Then he brought me back by the way of the gate of the outward sanctuary, which looketh toward the east, and it was shut. So the glory's entered. He's brought back here. Now, there's the east that way. Mount Zion's this way to the left. So he's brought back here. And he notices something. The gate is shut. Why is it shut? It says in verse 2, Then said Yahweh unto me, This gate shall be shut. It shall not be opened, and no man shall enter in by it. Why? Because Yahweh, the God of Israel, obviously in the person of Christ, hath entered in by it. Therefore it shall be shut. What does that mean? Well, once he goes in, he's not going out. When the glory comes back, it's never leaving again. That's the message. He's the epitome of that glory. Once he enters, the saints come in with him, gate shut. It says verse 3, It is for the prince, a reference to Christ. The prince, he shall sit in it to eat bread before Yahweh. He shall enter by the way of the porch of that gate and should go out by the way of the same. That doesn't mean he's going to go out this way, brothers and sisters. It means he's coming. There's a porch here. There's no porch out here. When it says he's going to enter by the porch, this is what he uses, this porch. The only way he's going to go is inside this building. We want to talk about that. Once he's in here, this is where Christ will dwell. In this row of cellae or halls on the eastern side, he's not leaving for 1,000 years. And you and I are going to spend some time with him in that place. We should have a look at a couple of passages. Luke chapter 12, this is 35 to 40. Now this will go on over the period of 1,000 years. Plenty of time, plenty of opportunity. Luke 12, verse 35. So here's the exhortation for the present. Let your loins be girded about and your lights burning, and so they should be. And ye yourselves like unto men that wait for their Lord, when he will return from the wedding, that when he cometh and knocketh, they may open unto him immediately. Blessed are those servants whom the Lord, when he cometh, shall find watching. Verily I say unto you that he shall gird himself and make them to sit down to meat or food, and will come forth and serve them. And if he shall come in the second watch or come in the third watch and find them so, blessed are those servants. And this know, that if the good man of the house had known what hour the thief would come, he would have watched, and have not suffered his house to be broken through. Be ye therefore ready also, for the Son of Man cometh at an hour when you think not. How important is it for us to see the signs for what they are, to know how close we are to the return of Christ, and to be ready for it. And if we are, guess what the privilege is? Immortality and spending time in this place with our Lord Jesus Christ. And he's going to break bread and drink wine anew in this place with groups of saints all through the 1,000 years. And guess what the experience will be? I think most of us would think that when we came through the door of one of these halls where he's going to eat those meals with his saints, that he would sit down and some of us would get up and get the food and distribute. True? Not so. He will make us sit down, and he will get up and gird himself with a servant's apron and come and serve you. Feel worthy of that? No, of course you don't. But you see the point of this? That if you can see yourself there, brothers and sisters, what's that going to do to your life today? You get that? That's why Ezekiel's told, look at this place, get it right in your mind, and go and tell people about it. They may change their way of life and be there in that day. That's the message. And that's why we read of these things. Things that we think, no, that's not possible. Christ making me sit down and serving me? It's like Peter, you'll never wash my hands and feet. If I don't wash you, you won't be there. Same principle. We've got to make sure we understand these things and that they motivate us to fashion our lives today to be ready for that time, because it's not very far away. So the Prince resides here. These gates are shut for 1,000 years. And what he will do is offer his sacrifices on new moons and Sabbaths. He will make his way through the porch. Remember what I said that? He'll come through the porch. He'll come over here. And he will stand here while his chosen priests for this particular day will prepare his sacrifices. Guess who that's going to be? At least once or twice throughout that 1,000-year reign of Christ. You got it. You and me. preparing Christ's sacrifices. Then we will carry his sacrifice while he comes to this threshold of the house, and he will worship Yahweh in the presence of all the people who will be gathering themselves out here in the separate place of the inner court. Let's illustrate this. I want you to come to Ezekiel 46. Ezekiel 46 verses 1 to 3. Thus saith Adonai Yahweh, verse 1. Now, this is where it's so important to know where these places are. Let's just read it. The gate of the inner court that looketh toward the east. So where are we? The gate of the inner court. So where's your inner court? Well, your inner court starts here at this wall, right, and goes into the gates or entrances into the Most Holy. So this is inner court here. These buildings, right, from the fascia, the outer fascia, into the doors or gates of the inner circular sanctuary. That's your inner court. So he says, the gate of the inner court that looketh toward the east shall be shut 6 working days. So these gates are shut. There's no access. There's no access from here into the eastern side for 6 days a week. But on the Sabbath it shall be open, and in the day of the new moon it shall be open. And the prince shall enter by the way of the porch of that gate without, and shall stand by the post of the gate. This is a reference to being in this porch here, that little dotted line that you can see. And the priests shall prepare his burnt offering and his peace offerings, and he shall worship at the threshold of the gate. Then he shall go forth. Now when you read words like that, then he shall go forth, you would sort of say, well, that means he's going to leave the house. No. He's not going forth out that way. He's going to go forth in this way. So follow the arrows. These gates are shut until the new moon or the Sabbath. So in come the mortal worshippers. And this is one of the highlights of their day in this house on a Sabbath or a new moon. They will gather in this area. It's called the separate place between the 2 rows of buildings. And they will all try and squeeze up here because it's likely the prince will make his sacrifices in the middle of the house. When his priests have prepared his sacrifices and he stands and worships Yahweh in the threshold of this gate, he will then go forth. Where's he going forth to? He's going into the Most Holy. He's going to the place where the sacrifices will be placed on the altar. He's going into this chamber of the singers to sing with his saints on that day. Yeah, he's going in to be busily involved in the affairs of that house. That's what this passage is about. Wonderful thing, isn't it? And it says here, likewise, the people of the land shall worship at the door of this gate. So they're here. There's the green arrows. The people are there. They worship at the door of this gate before Yahweh in the Sabbaths and the new moons. It will be one of the highlights of a mortal's time in this house. And this is the illustration from another perspective. I want you to come to Psalm 116, if you would. Psalm 116. And you read from verse 9, I will walk before Yahweh in the lands, as it should read, plural word, in the lands of the living, in the realm of immortality. Come down to verse 15. Precious in the sight of Yahweh is the death, it says in the King James, of his saints. Wrong. It should read, precious in the sight of Yahweh is the death for his saints. It's a reference to the sacrifice of Christ. That's what's precious, the sacrifice of Christ. Then come down to verse 17. This is Christ speaking in this messianic psalm. He says, I will offer to thee the sacrifice of thanksgiving. I will call upon the name of Yahweh. I will pay my vows unto Yahweh now in the presence of all his people. And where's he going to do this? Well, look at verse 19. In the courts of Yahweh's house in the midst of thee, O Jerusalem. Yeah, so here he is. This is the gate that's shut 6 days a week. This is where the people gather in the separate place. On a Sabbath, he chooses some priests. You're my priest today. And they go with him. These are immortal priests. They go and they prepare his sacrifices in the porch, 50 cubits back from where he is. And here he is. Sacrifices prepared, saints standing there with him. He worships before the people. Can you imagine that? And then he walks through them to go in to the circular sanctuary, to go into the most holy. That's the picture of Ezekiel chapter 46. And you and I, brothers and sisters, at some point are going to be there to share that experience. What a wonderful thing that will be. And when he goes in, there is what's called in Ezekiel the chambers of the singers. That's because in this place there will be hundreds of thousands of immortal saints singing on any given day. Songs like the world has never heard. All immortal voices, and Christ will join them. He goes in to join them. One of the highlights of services held in this place will be the singing that is heard there. There'll be 3 levels. Imagine how many people you can get into that building. Hundreds of thousands. 3 levels of involvement in the most glorious and majestic worship that the world has ever known. Wonderful things, are they not? I don't know about you, brothers and sisters, but I would like to go in the East Gate. Wouldn't you? I'd love to go in the East Gate. I don't mind at all. It's going to be shut behind me. Because we're going to have a task of 1,000 years of labour in that house